Hi everyone. A few years ago, I was really passionate about making a lot of projects for YouTube, and I created a bunch of different projects like the Guitar Amp PC and some other things, and I started making the videos for them. I recorded all the video, just didn't get around to editing it all, and then I just got kind of burnt out and stopped making them and never actually produced them. Well, this is one of those projects. This is a computer that I made specifically to be a space heater. So this is made out of old, used, mostly donated parts that would have otherwise been thrown out or recycled. I got a few of them off eBay for pretty cheap. And yeah, so the idea was inspired by the AMD FX era. Back in the day, people used to overclock these AMD FX CPUs to pretty intense levels where they would produce quite a bit of heat, because when overclocked, these things could go from drawing like 100 watts to almost 300 watts of power, which is pretty crazy. In fact, over 300 watts of power. So you wanted to make sure you had a good cooler on these, and people would joke about their computers being space heaters because they put out so much heat. So I thought, could I get one of these old boards and actually build a computer on purpose to function like a space heater? Now, a space heater has to produce at least 500 watts to be like a very tiny space heater. And I thought, well, to be a good space heater, it has to produce at least 1,000 watts. And if I could get above the 1,000 watt limit, then that would be a really good space heater. Now, something you might not understand about the way wattage works: an appliance that uses, say, 100 watts of power is going to generate 100 watts of heat. Any electric heater is 100% efficient because any waste, any inefficiency is lost as heat. So if your computer draws 500 watts of power from the outlet, that means it is giving off 500 watts of heat. So keep that in mind. When you're building a computer, the more wattage it uses, like those the RTX 5090 cards or 4090 cards, they use a lot of power. And that power, where does it go? It goes into your room as heat. Anyway, so this is an old case. This case is huge, and this was donated to me by a friend. He got it from a coworker, and the case has a name. It's named Thor. It's missing a plastic piece here, and I was going to design and 3D print a replacement for that, but I never got around to that. But this case is just absolutely gigantic. You can see it has these old water cooling pass-throughs in the back, so that ages the case fairly well. And let's go ahead and take a look inside. So this is what we have inside of this beast. We have an AMD FX processor. Now, I forget the exact number of this. It's the first 8-core processor that was made, I believe. And I overclocked this thing to about 4 gigahertz, which is pretty impressive considering when this thing was made. This thing was made a long time ago. And I installed 2 R9 290X GPUs in here. These GPUs use so much power, and they're some of the first, if not the first, I think they are the first 8 GB cards ever made. If not, they're one of the first 8 GB cards ever made. And you can still game on these things today with third-party drivers, and they're not great, but considering how old they are, they can still pull their weight fairly well. And to power all of this, I needed to find a 1,000 watt power supply. And I found this Cooler Master Silent Pro 1,000 watt power supply. This is one of the most expensive parts to build, but I did get it used off eBay for fairly cheap. I don't think anything in here cost me more than 50 bucks. I got each of these cards for around $50 each. This one sold for fairly cheap because it was missing the enclosure and had 2 fans on it, and this one sold for fairly cheap because the fans weren't powering on correctly, but I updated the BIOS on both of these cards, and it fixed the fan speed issue where one of the fans would turn on, the other one wouldn't no matter how hot it got. But after updating the BIOS to a different BIOS version, then it actually works. Okay, so this thing, when it's on... Oh, I kind of forgot to talk about this thing. So it was pulling about 1000 watts of heat when overclocked. And I know I had a little bit more headroom than that because that's 1000 watts from the outlet itself. And the computer itself, the power supply itself wasn't supplying 1000 watts to the components yet. It was only supplying somewhere around 800 or something. And I attached this old mining thing so I could attach a third GPU to this, which I did. And the third GPU was a much less powerful one. It was a GTX 750 Ti, and I hooked that in there. And then with overclocking the CPU to the max, it's as much as I could with this air cooler. And of course I put new thermal paste on everything here. When doing that, I was able to pull over 1,200 watts of power from the wall. Now, how can you do that? How can you pull 1,200 watts of power from the wall when it's just a 1,000 watt power supply? Well, because you're pulling that much from the wall, that doesn't mean the power supply is providing that much power, because they're only around 80% efficient if you get one of these older ones. So that means that 20% of that power is just waste heat. It's not going anywhere other than heat. So the power supply itself might be pulling 1,200 watts from the wall, but only supplying 1,000 watts to the components. So, yeah, that's it. It is a space heater. It's a literal space heater made out of old computer components, and this thing put out so much heat. You open up the vents on the top, and the fans just blow out tons of heat. And it literally felt like being next to a space heater on full blast. Now, did I game on this thing? Yeah, a little bit, but even with games that supported dual GPUs, I couldn't really maximize the potential of both of these GPUs. So to use all the components in here so they draw full power, what I had to do is use Blender and do a rendering of something pretty complex. So my son, he made a rendering of a black hole that was very realistic, like photorealistic. And we rendered that on the system in Blender. But because these cards are so old that the current version of Blender doesn't support dual R9s in it, so we had to use an old version of Blender to render this. And we did that, and it worked great. It actually rendered at pretty decent speeds in comparison to my really new computer, which is kind of crazy considering how old it is. I mean, it was slower, but considering how old it is, it actually did fairly well. But it produced 1,200 watts of heat doing that, which was just, it was beautiful. Anyway, so I did prove that you can indeed create a space heater out of a computer using old components that would otherwise go to waste. So I'm making this video today not because I really felt like making this video, because I honestly have more important things to do right now than make YouTube videos about tech stuff. But I made this video today because I'm going to pull out this power supply for a new build that I'm doing for a backup computer for a system that I'm developing. So I do need this power supply. Everything else I'm going to part out and sell. So you can probably check my eBay store soon and you'll see these parts going up. If anyone's interested, just let me know. And yeah, have a great day.